The rise and fall of the Roman Empire. In the heart of the Italian peninsula, where 7 hills rise from the Tiber River, a legend was born that would reshape the entire world. The year was 753 BCE, and according to ancient myth, twin brothers Romulus and Remus, abandoned as infants and nursed by a she-wolf, founded a city that would become the eternal beacon of civilization. What began as a collection of mud huts inhabited by shepherds and fugitives would, through ambition and blood, transform into an empire stretching from the fog-shrouded forests of Britain to the sun-scorched deserts of Arabia. The early Romans were farmers and warriors, their lives governed by the rhythm of seasons and the demands of survival. They built their settlement on the Palatine Hill, fortifying it against neighboring tribes who coveted their strategic position. The Romans understood that greatness required sacrifice, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the collective good over individual desires. These values, forged in the crucible of constant warfare, would become the bedrock upon which an empire was built. For 2.5 centuries, Rome existed under the rule of kings, 7 monarchs who expanded the city's influence and established its fundamental institutions. But in 509 BCE, the Romans expelled their last king, the tyrannical Tarquin the Proud, and established a republic governed by elected magistrates and a senate of aristocratic elders. This revolutionary system, imperfect though it was, created a framework where power was shared, debated, and constrained by law. The Roman Republic had declared that no single man should hold absolute power, a principle that would guide the state for nearly 500 years. The Republic's expansion began with the conquest of neighboring Italian tribes. The Romans proved themselves masters of both warfare and diplomacy, offering defeated enemies a choice: complete destruction or incorporation into Rome's growing confederation. Many chose the latter, swelling Rome's military ranks and extending its influence. By 264 BCE, Rome controlled the entire Italian peninsula, but across the Mediterranean, a rival power threatened to check their ambitions: the maritime empire of Carthage. The Punic Wars would test Rome's very survival. Hannibal Barca, Carthage's brilliant general, led his army, complete with war elephants, across the Alps in a feat of military daring that stunned the ancient world. For 15 years he ravaged Italy, destroying Roman armies at Trebia, Trasimene, and most catastrophically at Cannae, where 50,000 Romans fell in a single day. Yet Rome refused to surrender. The Republic mobilized every resource, sacrificed every comfort, and ultimately produced a general of equal genius, Scipio Africanus, who carried the war to Africa and defeated Hannibal on his own soil. Victory over Carthage left Rome as the Mediterranean's dominant power, but success brought unforeseen consequences. Wealth flooded into the Republic from conquered territories, enriching the aristocracy, while traditional small farmers, the backbone of Roman society, found themselves displaced. The gap between rich and poor widened into a chasm. Brothers Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus attempted to reform the system, redistributing land to dispossessed veterans, but the Senate, protecting its privileges, orchestrated their murders. Blood had been spilled in Rome's political arena, a precedent that would haunt the Republic's final century. The 1st century BCE witnessed the Republic's death throes. Generals commanding loyal armies became more powerful than the state itself. Marius and Sulla, once allies, plunged Rome into civil war. Pompey the Great conquered the East but returned to find the Senate fearful of his ambition. Into this volatile landscape stepped Gaius Julius Caesar, a patrician of modest means but unlimited ambition, who formed an alliance with Pompey and the wealthy Crassus, the so-called First Triumvirate that effectively controlled Rome while maintaining republican facades. Caesar's conquest of Gaul brought glory and wealth, but the Senate demanded he disband his army before returning to Rome. Caesar understood this meant his destruction. In January 49 BCE, he uttered the words, "The die is cast," and crossed the Rubicon River with his legions, an act of treason that ignited civil war. Caesar pursued Pompey across the Mediterranean, defeating him in Greece and chasing him to Egypt. where the young king presented Caesar with Pompey's severed head, a gift the conqueror reportedly wept over. Caesar returned to Rome as dictator, implementing sweeping reforms while the old aristocracy seethed. On the Ides of March 44 BCE, senators who claimed to defend the Republic surrounded Caesar in the theater of Pompey and stabbed him 23 times. As he fell at the foot of Pompey's statue, the Republic died with him. The assassins had killed the man but could not resurrect the system he had overthrown. Rome's destiny now lay with those who controlled military force, not constitutional principle. From the chaos emerged Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old grandnephew and adopted heir. Few imagined this sickly youth could avenge his father or claim his inheritance, but Octavian possessed political genius that compensated for his physical frailty. He formed the Second Triumvirate with Mark Antony and Lepidus, together crushing the assassins at Philippi. Then the triumvirs turned on each other. Mark Antony, Rome's greatest general, abandoned his Roman wife for Egypt's queen Cleopatra, and together they dreamed of an Eastern empire to rival Rome itself. Octavian portrayed Antony as a traitor bewitched by an Oriental temptress. At Actium in 31 BCE, Octavian's fleet shattered their combined forces. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Alexandria where, surrounded and defeated, they chose suicide over capture. Octavian stood alone, master of the Roman world. The Senate, desperate to avoid further civil war, showered Octavian with honors and powers. In 27 BCE, they granted him the title Augustus, meaning the revered one. He claimed to have restored the Republic, but in truth he had created something entirely new, the Roman Empire, with himself as its first emperor. Augustus ruled for 41 years, bringing a peace and prosperity Rome had not known for generations. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, had begun. Under Augustus and his successors, Roman engineering and administration reached heights never before achieved. Aqueducts carried water across mountains to supply cities with fountains and public baths. Roads, straight as arrows and built to last millennia, connected distant provinces to Rome. The Roman legal system established principles of justice that would influence law for 2,000 years. Literature flourished under Virgil, Horace, and Ovid. For 2 centuries, the Mediterranean world enjoyed unprecedented stability and prosperity. Yet the empire's success contained the seeds of its decline. The army, once composed of citizen soldiers defending their homeland, became a professional force recruited increasingly from barbarian tribes beyond the frontiers. These soldiers owed loyalty to generals who paid them, not to Rome itself. The emperors who followed the Augustan dynasty grew increasingly decadent or deranged. Caligula declared himself a god and reportedly made his horse a consul. Nero fiddled while Rome burned, then blamed Christians for the fire, launching the first great persecution. The 3rd century brought crisis. In 50 years, more than 20 emperors claimed the purple, most dying violent deaths. Germanic tribes breached the Rhine and Danube frontiers. Persians invaded from the east. Plague ravaged the provinces. The economy collapsed under the weight of military expenditures and debased currency. The empire seemed poised to fragment entirely until soldier emperors like Aurelian and Diocletian temporarily stabilized the situation through military strength and administrative reform. Diocletian divided the empire into eastern and western halves, each with its own emperor and subordinate Caesar. Constantine, emerging victorious from yet another civil war, reunited the empire briefly and made a decision that would echo through the ages. He converted to Christianity, transforming a persecuted sect into the empire's official religion. He also founded a new capital, Constantinople, on the site of ancient Byzantium. Rome's center of gravity shifted eastward, away from the city that had given the empire its name. The 4th century witnessed the final division. After Emperor Theodosius died in 395 CE, the empire permanently split into eastern and western halves. The East, wealthier and more urbanized, would endure for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. The West, increasingly dependent on barbarian mercenaries and foederati allied tribes, struggled against mounting pressures, Rome itself, once the caput mundi, the head of the world, had become a shadow of its former glory, its population declined, its monuments crumbling. The barbarians who crossed into Roman territory in increasing numbers were not mindless destroyers, but desperate refugees fleeing Hunnic invasions from the east. The Visigoths, Vandals, Burgundians, and Franks sought land and security within the empire's borders. Rome, lacking the military strength to expel them, attempted to accommodate and control them. But these Germanic peoples established their own kingdoms within imperial territory, ruling as independent powers while Roman authority evaporated. In 410 CE, an event occurred that shocked the entire world. Alaric and his Visigoths sacked Rome itself. The Eternal City, unconquered for 800 years, fell to barbarian warriors. Though the actual destruction was limited and the Visigoths withdrew after 3 days, the psychological impact reverberated throughout the empire. If Rome could fall, nothing was permanent. Nothing was safe. The Western Empire's final decades witnessed a procession of puppet emperors controlled by barbarian generals who wielded true power. Attila the Hun ravaged Gaul and Italy before his sudden death saved Rome from complete destruction. The Vandals sacked the city again in 455, this time more thoroughly. Britain, Gaul, Spain, and North Africa slipped away, forming independent Germanic kingdoms. The empire shrank until it consisted of little more than Italy itself. In 476 CE, a Germanic general named Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, a boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus, Little Augustus, echoing both Rome's legendary founder and its first emperor. Odoacer saw no purpose in maintaining the fiction of Roman authority and simply assumed control of Italy as its king. The Roman Empire in the West had ceased to exist, not with a catastrophic collapse, but with a whimper almost unnoticed. Contemporaries barely remarked upon it. Yet Rome's fall was not civilization's end, but its transformation. The Eastern Roman Empire continued for nearly 1,000 years, preserving classical learning and Roman law. The Catholic Church, structured on Roman administrative principles, became Western Europe's unifying institution. Germanic kingdoms adopted Latin language and Roman customs. The Byzantine Empire's legal code would influence all of European law. The Renaissance would rediscover and celebrate classical Roman achievement. Rome's legacy transcends its political existence. The Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, descended from Latin. Roman engineering principles guided architects and builders for centuries. The concept of citizenship, of rights protected by law rather than the whims of rulers, traces to Roman precedent. Republican ideals inspired modern democracies. The very calendar by which we measure time derives from Julius Caesar's reform. The Roman Empire fell because it grew too large to defend, because economic inequality destabilized society, because political institutions failed to adapt to changing circumstances, and because the very success that brought prosperity also bred complacency. Yet in failing, Rome succeeded in spreading its culture, language, and ideas throughout Europe and the Mediterranean. The empire ended, but Roman civilization endured, woven into the fabric of Western culture. Today, tourists walk where emperors once ruled, tracing the outline of the Colosseum, ascending the Capitoline Hill, standing in the Forum where Cicero spoke and Caesar fell. The stones remember, the ruins whisper of glory and hubris, of achievement and decline. Rome reminds us that all empires, however mighty, are temporary, but that ideas carefully nurtured and transmitted can outlive any political structure. The Roman Empire fell 15 centuries ago, yet we remain in countless ways the heirs of Rome, shaped by its triumphs and instructed by its failures, forever walking in the shadows of its monuments and the light of its enduring legacy.